First item, 7A, under supply of water to Landsville, adding 2 delegations, Mr. Fred Taylor, Mr. Jim Taylor. Mr. Robert Fuller is unable to attend this evening. Item 8A, under telecommunications tower, adding a delegation, Dr. Fred and Ms. Carol Dow. Item 9A, under Colliery Dams, a delegation by Mr. Jeff Solomon. Item 9C, property maintenance bylaw, delete in its entirety. Item 12A, council appointments, add ratification of the appointment to the Grants Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much. And so we'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Your Worship, I have a request for a late delegation, that being Ms. Christina Nickel, in conjunction with supply of water to Landsville.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed?
And adoption agenda as.
Okay, just 1 second. I'll come back on that one. So we're there. It's 10 minutes now. That because we on all of the items except the late delegation is still 5.
That's right. So under 7A, for example, Mr. Fred Taylor and Mr. Jim Taylor will have 10 minutes.
10.
And Ms. Christina Nickel would be 5 minutes in accordance with the procedure bylaw.
Okay,
Your Worship.
thank you. Just wanted to check that. Councillor Kipp, you're going to move the
Adoption agenda
as amended.
Second.
Move and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the minutes?
Adoption of the minutes.
A and B?
Let's vote A and B.
Second.
Move and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move straight into 7A, administration. And at this point, I will abandon the chair. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patchy, did you have nothing else?
Sorry.
And because I've got a perceived conflict of interest as a resident of Landsville, and from the very beginning, I have not been involved with discussions in or to do with the water to supply Landsville. So we'll call on the acting mayor, please, chair as well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And regarding the supply of water, to obtain council's approval for the water supply agreement, we have delegations. Mr. Fred Taylor will be the first delegation. Welcome, Mr. Taylor. You have 10 minutes.
Members, before you tonight and on the screen is some pictures of Jump Lake, a storage of city water. This was in November '87, and you see it's empty. The original little lake is over there, and even a logging road that's across the lake, underneath the lake, as you can see there, still shows when it's empty. There's a spillway empty, same time. And there's another view of looking at the logging road way down in the valley there where the Jump Lake is empty. I'm aware or understand you've been searching for sites for more storage area, i.e. another dam, etc. in the past. I have followed council for many years, and in my opinion, it's always been promoted you don't give this type of services outside the city, or you're defeating the purpose of creating greater density in the city. Once you start to run all these facilities outside the city limits, land is cheaper, etc. You're going to see more development happen outside the city. So in my opinion, I don't support running these sort of services outside the municipality to anyone. In the case of one town we're talking about here tonight, where is the...
Can you pull the mic up a bit higher, Fred, maybe?
Where is the, for instance, RCMP station in the town of, village of Landsville? They're still depending on run some of our services to that area, in my opinion. So therefore, we need to stop and see what we're getting here, and I don't believe just money should be the issue. We have to protect the growth in our own community. Thank you.
I see no questions. To the delegation, no? Thank you. Mr. Jim Taylor. Welcome, Mr. Taylor. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll address the Lanceville water supply deal that's before you tonight. So one could wonder if this proposed deal to supply water to Lanceville is really about Nanaimo just being good neighbors to our friends in Lanceville, where a few hundred folk chose to gamble on whether or not well water was going to supply their needs, or whether it's a case of the Nanaimo taxpayer is being manipulated into doing the heavy lifting that would supply water for a massive development that's well outside the city limits of Nanaimo. We're told one of the reasons that Nanaimo taxes are so high is because of the massive geographical area that we already cover. Basically, our infrastructure is spread out all over Hell's Half Acre. And that's a fine example of creating urban sprawl. Taxpayers to this day are still paying for that urban sprawl and lack of planning. This deal with Lanceville seems to make me wonder why we have official community plans, city boundaries, and the like. What does urban containment boundary actually mean? How do we apply it? A spokesman for the 730 hectare, and for those old timers of us, that's 1,800 acres of foothill developments north of Lanceville, has indicated this water could make their development viable. Lanceville's mayor is quoted as saying he's prepared to renegotiate the water deal with Nanaimo to accommodate future development of Lanceville, not Nanaimo, Lanceville. I presume that that development will wind up paying more taxes to Lanceville. A quick read of the draft that's before you tonight, which has been months in the making, I believe it started May of last year, needs far more scrutiny from this council and the taxpayers of Nanaimo before we make another costly decision, which could well rival shiny new offices, conference centers, water treatment plants, hotel tax giveaways, and the like, all of which combine to add to the unaffordable burden that taxes are becoming to about half of our citizens now. Just a few questions raised after reading the information supplied in tonight's agenda, and there are lots of questions, but time won't permit to go into all of them. One, we've been told that Nanaimo will run out of water by 2020 or 2024, depending on whose crystal ball you want to believe, and that solution could possibly be another $100 million spent on a dam. That $100 million for a dam was a 2007 figure. It was pre all these new regulations for dams, so who knows what a $100,000 or $100 million dam is actually going to cost today. So we know we're facing a water crunch. So why are we speeding that day up by adding potentially 1,800 developable acres to our demand on water? What does this deal cost the existing Nanaimo taxpayers? Anybody actually gotten into the numbers and figured out what this expansion is going to cost the Nanaimo taxpayer? I'm pretty sure it's not going to cost us nothing. How many places are actually involved in this agreement to start off with? There's a reference to 225 lots, 211 properties, but there's no specifics as to what that consumption actually entails. It calls for a maximum of 50 new development lots being connected each year. But again, it makes no distinction as to what kind of users they may be. All it says is that major agriculture won't be allowed. Now, that's another example of the ambiguity that's in this agreement. Who determines what is major agriculture? Is it 5 acres, half an acre, 50 acres, 100 acres? We won't allow golf courses either, but it does allow for industrial and commercial. But depending on what those industrial or commercial applications could be, and according to this, you could have 50 new industrial connections in one particular year. If you don't know what they are, they could also be very heavy users of water. Again, there's no specifics in the contract. It says that Lanceville will support Nanaimo in securing a future water supply, but it makes no reference as to what that support looks like in terms of dollars and cents. Again, no specifics. It says that Lanceville, water won't be supplied to Lower Lanceville or more than 50 lots, again, nothing specific, until a new source is approved for Nanaimo. Again, no specifics as to what that source has to be or the capacity of that source. Are all future connections going to pay $5,900 to Nanaimo? and all we supply is just the courtesy of being able to hook up. Perhaps one of the questioning or more troublesome sections in the contract is section 3.2, and it states, a lot of legalese here, it is a condition precedent to the obligations of Nanaimo under this agreement that Nanaimo secure an additional supply of water to supplement its current supply sufficient to meet its obligations under this agreement, and gives notice of this to Landsville. Now that makes it sound as if we are obligating ourselves to increase our water supply to serve Landsville, giving them a blank check, if you will. Whatever Landsville says they need, we're going to be obligated to supply it to them. So where are the supporting studies that are showing what the actual economic impact of this agreement is going to be on the average taxpayer in Nanaimo? How is this going to impact our water supply? What are we actually obligating ourselves for with this agreement? This document calls for the approval of Nanaimo City Council, Landsville's council, and the Landsville electors. I would submit to this council it also requires the approval of the Nanaimo taxpayers. And slamming this approval through tonight will deny those who will forever be paying for your decision the opportunity to examine this deal and give it the full scrutiny that it deserves. Given that it has taken the staff and their lawyers from May of last year to come up with this agreement, allowing the people who will actually have to pay for the agreement more than a couple of days to evaluate the agreement is hardly an unreasonable request. There are far too many unanswered questions that need answering before saddling the Nanaimo taxpayers with this agreement, and I hope you don't approve it tonight. Thank you.
Is there any questions of Jason? I have one. Mr. Taylor, you mentioned the question of economic impact. Has Nanaimo done an economic impact? And what was the other after the economic
How
impact?
this will actually impact our water supply and what our water supply needs are going to be.
Thank you.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we require a motion. What's that? Oh, Mrs. Nichols, sorry, almost forgot. A 5-minute delegation from Mrs. Christina Nichols. Sorry about that, Mrs. Nichols. That's why you're here, Fred.
It is a big question, and I'm surprised there are so few people here to discuss it with you. And I'm very appreciative that you squeezed me on at the last moment, thanks to Mr. Patchy. Mr. Taylor has said so eloquently many of the things I would have said, so I will confine myself to starting to point out that there is a limited water supply. This is made clear in a Water Resources Report of 2007, which came to this council. The water supply is limited, and nobody has done any studies to figure out how much water there may eventually be. They've talked about another dam. This year they worried about the snowpack, and then there are vague wavings of hands about drilling some wells down to the south. And anyone who's drunk water out of some of those wells down to the south will like to know which wells they're going to offer for this supply. Some of those wells are very sulfurous. There is no mention in that agreement, and no mention anywhere I can find, in the requirements of the Tsunemu, who are requesting a share of the water, I understand. And I'm not here to speak for them, but just to point out that it may come back to bite us if we don't have the water to supply them because they are entitled to it, whereas Landsville is not entitled to it. And I don't know why we would be giving this wonderful Nanaimo water to a community which has been growing and existing on its own supply, and now it wants ours. And one suspects it's for the sake of development and people who want to get off wells, and wells are never as certain and never as clean as river water such as we have in Nanaimo. It is always a hazard, and people who've lived in Landsville have known that. Fortunately, we no longer seem to have endemic diseases that pass through contaminated water supplies anymore, but I suppose it could happen. The 50 development sites per year for 5 years is new development, and of course it's just the thin edge of the wedge, and of course it's that whole mountainside. And as far as the benefit to Nanaimo, what is the benefit? Apparently they'd pay for water, but that's not very much. We pay for water. We have a very low water rate. And they would pay $5,912.26 per connection, exactly the same as anybody in the city limits who hooks up to the water supply, exactly the same as what a citizen of Nanaimo pays. But in addition to the water bill that we get, we also get every year a tax notice. And I notice on looking at mine that most of my taxes go straight to a general fund for the city of Nanaimo, and I suppose the water is part of that. We wouldn't have that sum of money from each of those people in Lantzville. We would be maintaining the water supply and expanding it on our own. We could not demand anything from Lantzville. And I don't see why this council would choose to walk into this. I would suggest that you step back and make sure that there is the water supply. No one has done that study. No one even knows how long we're going to be able to rely on runoff, snow runoff. No one has figured these things out. This is a long-term problem. And it's going to, in 20 or 30 years, I won't be around to worry about it, but most of the citizens of Nanaimo will be. And it's a big problem if you want to think ahead to some silted up dams and some drying up wells. And I leave you with that. Think about California at this point before you decide to give the water away.
Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. Is there any questions? No? Yes, there is one question, and I'm going to say
so
you
much-
probably will be around for another 30 years or so, knowing
I
you.
will.
You might, with that fight you have in you. So.
That's very optimistic, but I thank you for that.
Councillor Paget has a question.
Just to comment more than anything else, since Ms. Nichols referred to Shunamo First Nation, I just want to make sure that you realize that this council, in the last year and a half, has provided, at the request of Shunamo First Nation, water to IR2 and IR4, which was a major undertaking for which I understand them to be grateful. And
So
so,
they-
I want to make sure that that
They
you
have
realize
their water.
They have, well, they may want more, but they have been given what they asked for so far.
Okay, thank you for informing me. I didn't know that. I trolled through the city website and I couldn't find that information, but I'm not very good at digging this out. Thank you for correcting me.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, council's pleasure. Council Brennan?
Just want to ask staff, just want some clarification on some issues. Is water paid for out of general revenue?
We pay for the, moving forward for the water source out of the development cost charges and through the user rates. So the theory with what we're entering into with Lantzville, if council approves it, would be a connection rate equivalent to the development cost charges, and then they would pay their water rates the same way that City of Nanaimo pays their water rates, which would go towards the long-term upgrade of the water supply. And I would also mention, if I could, that the estimate of when we would run out of water of 2024 is just an estimate, and it's based on a whole bunch of factors, which included, at the time we did the study, providing water to Lantzville.
And second question, does this agreement contemplate providing water to the Foothills development that we've heard so much about?
Acting Mayor Kipp, it does, but council specifically directed that the agreement be amended from the original MOU in 2005 when this started to restrict the new growth to 50 lots per year for Lantzville until a new source is brought online.
Thank you. And the agreement calls for Lantzville to partner with us in any representations we make to the province to provide a greater source of water for Nanaimo?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the key positive parts of this, is that the province does look more favorably when you're providing water to the region as well.
So this would be a regional ask on
Correct.
From us rather than an individual city's ask?
It would be if council proceeds.
Thank you.
Anything further? What is council's direction? We don't have a motion on the floor currently.
Did you want a motion to
Or do
receive
you want to
the
just receive the
delegations?
delegations? Yes, please. So moved, seconded, okay. Motion's moved and seconded, all in favor? None? Okay. So, Councillor Bestwick.
Chair, Mayor Kipp. Well, this is a really sensitive and extremely delicate proposition. Anytime I think we speak to our most desired resource, probably beyond air on the planet, we need to be extremely cautious of how we deal with our water that we have invested in the infrastructure and will continue to. And will continue to aspire to draw residents to this community within our boundaries. And given the fact that we have acknowledged in our strategic plan that water is our #1 priority moving forward as a city being responsible to its residents and its taxpayers, then I don't think that I have any role other than to protect our citizens, to ensure that we have, moving forward, all of the benefits that we have today and for future generations within our limits, our boundaries, our city limits. So the speakers that came to the podium, I will not reinforce their statements, but I certainly support what their statements were and are. I believe that it is absolutely imperative that we care for our citizens first. I've sat here for several years and I've listened to many people that with me on council that have spoken about urban sprawl, that have spoken about the costs that are associated with maintaining infrastructures, and we have just added a 1% per annum infrastructure increase to our operations so that we can maintain what we have built over many decades. When we speak to Jump Lake and when we speak to other dams to support what may happen, and what may happen is what has been identified by staff and experts and consultants that are telling us with our growth on an annual basis that we may be faced with a less than desirous situation as it results in water shortages or otherwise, which may cap our growth. I don't know. But I'm not willing to sacrifice our precious resources for an area that does not contribute to our taxation, that will contribute in all likelihood to a sprawl environment that I don't know that we can afford at this point in time to even contemplate and or consider. So for those reasons and many more, and hopefully I don't speak again, I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I think I should make a motion so that when we speak to motions, there's actually one on the floor.
Good call.
So I would move that council approve the attached water agreement with the District of Lantzville and direct staff to forward it to Lantzville for its approval. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to that.
Motion seconded. Councillor Brennan, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that most of us understand that water is a regional issue, and we have recognized that for quite some time, working with our regional partners and in particular the regional district. The regional district sets out our regional growth strategy, and we have, I think it's not even that long ago when we endorsed the regional growth strategy and said that our policies and strategies to deal with growth would be consistent with the regional growth strategy. And 7 of the 9 of us here support the regional growth strategy. So this agreement is well within the implications of that growth strategy. The water, our water is, first of all, we don't own water. It's really a mistake to believe that communities or people own water. What we own is the infrastructure that provides water to our doors. Our water is paid for from DCCs and our water rates. And our water rates reflect the percentage of subsidy that Council decided several years ago that they would add so that the DCCs were 25% less, so that people buying lots to develop here, young people, would not have, would be able to afford lots. So we made that decision. I think it's still a good decision. The agreement with Lantzville provides that Lantzville will pay connection fees, and those connection fees have been calculated to reflect what we pay here in Nanaimo. They are calculated to reflect the cost that we have put in over the years for that water system. You couldn't ask for anything less. That would be unfair. But it is fair to ask them to pay what the rest of us would have to pay to reflect the costs that have come before us. The agreement with Lantzville provides water rates, and they're the same as they would be here. But they reflect the DCC supplement as well. That's added to that in this agreement. We know that we're going to have to start searching for sources of water, and in fact we have been, and we're aware of our needs, and we expect that somewhere out there around 2024 or later, we're going to need to go to the province and ask for approval on other sources of water. If we go all by ourselves, ignoring the needs of our neighbors, I think we're likely to get a bit of a cool response from the province. I think the province is looking to us to have a regional focus. And we've talked about regional focuses in lots of things, and in particular within our regional growth strategy, and Lantzville's growth strategy is consistent with the regional growth strategy. So there isn't any conflict there. So it seems to me that this is a good agreement for us. It helps us with our future expenses. It doesn't bring on a whole raft of new connections. It's very measured. It's slow, but it's consistent. And it brings on an ally for us when we go out searching for water and asking the province for their agreement to whatever source of water we decide would meet our needs. So this is a good agreement. I think it's a timely agreement, and I think it's an agreement that matches our regional aspirations. So for those reasons, I am supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Brennan brought up a lot of good points that I was going to mention, and I do recall having a meeting with the, excuse me, my voice, I got a cold, a meeting with the Council of Lantzville, and I said, basically, you'll get our water when we get a new source. And one of the councillors said, your water? And I said, well, we don't own the water, but I mean, and she was, quite concerned that I used that phrase, your water. We passed a resolution a while back that water is a human right. Although, in fact, we didn't pass it, did we? Because that was a federal issue and we couldn't pass it, but that was before us. And I believe that water is a human right. And, I used to think, no, you're not going to get supplied with water until we get our source of water ourselves. But I have every confidence that we're going to get a source of water. Every confidence. And it's not necessarily the source of water. I think it's the ability to reservoir the water. So I don't have an issue with that. I think we'll have the water in 2024. And I'm not going to go through what they're going to pay, what the connection fee is, how many connections, and so on and so forth. But I wonder if, and this is a little different situation, but I wonder if this was the same discussion went on when we were talking about the amalgamation with Harewood and Wellington and Departure Bay and Chase River and Protection Island. I wonder if it was a case of, well, we're not going to give them our water. Well, in fact, they do have our water now. And in fact, it's shipped underneath, it goes underneath the water to Protection Island at, I think, considerable expense. So it's, and don't forget the SFN water that we supplied, and don't forget the water that we supplied to Extension. So this is nothing new. This is basically a business deal. We're going to supply Landsville with bulk water. And we can charge them what we want, but to be fair, we're going to charge them what we pay for connections. Why do we do this? Because we're neighbors. They have poor water quality in some areas, and they have scarce water, and groundwater is not resupplying as quickly or recovering as fast as it should be, especially this past few months. So what do? Let them die of thirst? I mean, I know they're not going to die of thirst, but I mean, what are you going to do? Just let them not have water? They're paying for it. It's common in other parts of the country and the province. I believe that Victoria does the same thing. Victoria just doesn't have a water supply, and Oak Bay doesn't have a water supply, and Saanich does. I think they're all combined. So who knows? This might lead to amalgamation with Landsville. But that's another story. Now the arguments, why not? It's a them and us mentality. Those guys and our city. And you know, I don't have that, the ownership. I think because I'm from Ontario and I got here in 1980. I'm not an Nanaimo person. I didn't grow up here. So it's not a them and us thing for me. And I'm not saying it's a them and us thing for anybody on council here, don't get me wrong. But if someone who needs water, and they're going to pay for the water, and we have the water, and we can supply them with water, why would you not do it? Another example would be, or another argument would be, well, if you want our services, you got to pay our taxes. Well, that's a bit unrealistic. They're paying for their water. It's a business deal, pure and simple. Or move to Nanaimo if you don't like Landsville. That's unrealistic as well. So to conclude, the 225 connections in the Upper Landsville, plus the 211 other connections, plus the 50 new connections over 3 years, brings us to 586 connections in 3 years. If they all get connected. This thing might not even, you know, Landsville might vote this down. They might not be happy with this. But if they vote for it, I can't see this thing getting started for quite a while in Landsville, because they have to pass, they have to get the money, they have to put the services in the ground, then they have to get the hookups. So this isn't going to happen overnight. But 586 connections represents, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Mr. Sims or Mr. Swaby, represents 1.2% of our total water consumption that we have now. That's not very, give or take, roughly. 1.2%. That's what that represents in 3 years. I don't know how much water that is, how many liters or how many gallons, but we use 99% of that 100%. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue for quite a long time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There's Councillor Johnson, Padgett, Bestwick, and McKay in the queue. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Kipp. A lot of my questions and points have been made to the gallery tonight and to the people listening. I have a few questions through you to staff, if I may. What will the actual cost to our taxpayers be? There was a remark made tonight that there will be a cost to taxpayers.
Acting Mayor Kip, I'm not aware of any cost. The costs associated with the infrastructure to connect to the city services is specifically the requirement of Landsville, should they proceed.
All costs are being found by Landsville.
That's
right?
correct.
When did we agree as a council to provide water to council? We're really just looking at the contract tonight. We've already agreed as a council to provide water to Landsville citizens. When was that agreement made on behalf of this council?
The date that is sticking out is 2005 was the first time that the council of the day authorized an MOU that would proceed down our route to provide water to Landsville.
So really all we're doing tonight is putting forward a contract to the Landsville Council for them to ratify as well as ourselves.
That's correct. This council, the current council, actually ratified the MOU. I don't have the exact date. It was in the report. I apologize. And I've made a couple changes to the agreement to try and refine the cost better in line with if development cost charges change in the future.
And I thank you for that. It's a good contract, I believe. Somebody remarked as well, a delegation, I think was Mr. Jim Taylor, that what is it all about being good neighbors? A good chunk of it is about being good neighbors in my mind. Landsville are good neighbors to Nanaimo. They shop in our malls. They attend our theaters. Their children play hockey in our rinks. Their older children go to our universities. They pay a lot into our society. We reap a lot of benefits from Landsville being our good neighbor. And I have absolutely no qualms, Your Worship, about agreeing to this resolution tonight. And I have good faith, as does Councillor Greaves, that with our good neighbors, going forward to the province and with working through with the SFN, we will come to an agreement on water in the future and on a new source. So I would be very hopeful this council will agree with this tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Padgett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions first to staff, and then I'll tell you how I'm going to vote. Would you, Mr. Swaby, be willing to explain the assist factor in conjunction with DCCs, how we have done that, and how that, in a sense, would carry over to Landsville if this agreement should be approved?
Certainly, I'll have Mr. Howitt explain.
Acting Chair, the assist factor in the DCC calculations represents the portion that is attributable to the existing population. So in the case with water, the water supply DCC, 75% comes from the development cost charge, which is paid for by the developer. 25% comes from the ratepayers. If Landsville opts into this, council agrees to them, and they opt into this, they become a ratepayer. So the rates they pay to the city actually are contributions to that 25% when we do funding for future projects that are DCC projects for water supply.
Thank you for that. Second question would be to Mr. Sims, if I may, whom I do consider the expert on water issues in this municipality. And I just want you to give me a straight answer. If we go for these hookups, the 221 plus the 215 and then the 50 annually, given the fact that we have to look for additional sources, 2020 or 2024, whatever it may be, do you see any real impediment in the numbers that appear in this Landsville setup? Would it be more difficult for us to get the additional water, in your mind?
I'll take it off. Thank you. Technically, no. This is a relatively small percentage, as Councillor Greaves pointed out, to our overall supply.
And
Does that answer your question?
The same as the 1.2% that Councillor Greaves
plus or minus.
That's fine, okay. All right. Well, Olympic spirit seems to dissipate pretty quickly. I have heard the answers or the statements made by my colleagues, and besides the fact that I do consider Lanceville a good neighbor and that I think we should be sharing this, I think it's also really important for all of us to remember that we look beyond our borders, even where it comes to the precious commodity of water. We are a region, a regional district, with a growth strategy, with a growth containment boundary that, in fact, includes the foothills, or whatever it's going to be called from this point on. And those councillors who sat on council and who sit on the regional district board voted all for that regional growth strategy. I think that's an extremely important point to remember. It is one thing to vote one way and say, yes, you can build within that containment boundary. It's then an entirely different thing to deny the same municipality the opportunity to do so. And I'm saying that fully aware that what we are hopefully agreeing to is not going to be of that great an assist to the foothills. There are many things that this municipality does, whether it is mobile business licenses that are good almost anywhere on Vancouver Island, whether it is dealing with our public purchasing policy, which includes all of the region in the regional district of Nanaimo. There is so much more to what the Economic Development Corporation does, for instance. They consider themselves also the NEDC for the region, for the Mid-Island section. So I think it's extremely important that we start getting ourselves out of this myopic vision that we can only deal with things that happen within the border of this municipality. Our views have to be wider than that, because I tell you, in a place like Lanceville, where they maybe have built 2 houses in 2 years, and quote, correct me if I'm not quite up to speed with the number, but something like it, because there is no water, then there is no hope for that municipality. I cannot exhort you enough to get into your minds that we live on this island together, that we all are part of the Mid-Island, and that we have to do our very best to make sure that that works. The other point that is of equal importance was alluded to by Councillor Brennan earlier, which is that, yes, there is a time coming, and it's sooner rather than later, that we have to look for additional supply, be that 2020 or 2024 or wherever. But I know one thing, that we cannot go to the province of British Columbia, who is the authority that dispenses water licenses, assuming that we had the concurrence of Chenemo First Nation first, because that's foremost. But we cannot go to the province of British Columbia and ask for additional water and say at the same time, please give it, but we're not going to give a drop to Lanceville. That is just unrealistic. That is not going to work. That is plain wrong. Now, since I've been on council since 2008, I've had, with the rest of the councils who were present then, we've had some meetings with Lanceville, council to council, and our staff certainly have met a lot of time. And you have to know that it is not us who have gone to Lanceville with the request, please buy our water. We really want to sell it to you. It was they that came to us, not only this present council in Lanceville, but the one before that, and the one before that, and the one before that. So it is not a case of us pushing something because we want to do it so badly. I think with all the history of water between Lanceville and Nanaimo, the request to do what we hopefully will do, which, as Councillor Johnstone alluded to, is strictly to enforce the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed in May of last year or in June of last year. It's just a reaffirmation of what we intended to do then. And you know, if the Council of Landsville or the good people of Landsville don't want it, just send it back and we'll forget about it. But I think we're at the point where we need to show the willingness to share. It is as simple as that, and that is not simply a thing I'm saying because we're not a little egotistical about this thing, but ultimately, and from an economic point of view, it makes absolutely no sense for us to have a neighbor who cannot aspire to be what they want to be simply because we don't want to sell them a cup of water. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick and then Councillor McKay.
I've spoken once, so I'll defer to Councillor McKay.
I want to plug your name in again, please. Okay. Okay, one there. Okay, now plug it in again. Thank you. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to take a step, to contradict a couple of things that I believe were said. One was that water is not a regional issue, or water is a regional issue. No, it's not. Transportation is. Transit services are. Solid waste management is. Sanitary sewers are. So if water was intended to be a regional issue, then it would have been a regional issue, but it's not. Growth. Members on this council were elected because they opposed what they considered to be urban sprawl in our own community at the southern end. We talk about organized and methodical growth, starting from the center, moving out, proper density. What we're talking about here, in this particular one here, is at 300 liters per day average, times 2 people per home, times 436 connections, that's 261,000 liters of water a day. I don't know how the province can possibly give us a cool reception when they're asking you to give something away you don't have. We've been told we won't have enough. So why would we give away to another community that wants to develop? I don't get it, particularly when we were so opposed with development in our own community. As far as Protection Island and Harewood, when they joined and the other unorganized areas or regional areas that joined Nanaimo in the 70s, one of the things we have to remember about those folks is that they have continued to pay year after year after year our taxes. So every person in this community right now pays roughly $16 per person, per man, woman, and child for our hockey rinks. What does Landsville pay? What does Ladysmith pay? Nothing, other than the admission fee. Our swimming pools, $45 per man, woman, and child. Protection Island pays, Harewood pays. What does Landsville and Ladysmith pay? Nothing, other than the admission fee. So we have, at this point, we're jumping the gun, in my opinion. We have no new supply. We keep talking about a new supply. We have no idea what that's going to cost. We haven't got it yet. We've had a wee bit of a fright put into us here recently over this last winter about not enough water in the reservoirs. I attended the same meeting as Councillor Greaves, and I asked their mayor. So when he made the statement, you guys got water running over the reservoirs right now, running over the spillways. Okay, would you folks be interested in investing $4 or $5 or $6 million in a reservoir as a buffer in your community? Oh, no, we can't afford that. Oh, okay, well, how about you get together with the News, put a water system up in their TFL? Oh, no, we can't afford that. So either you want to be a community on your own or you don't. But I take exception to the fact that waters can claim to be a regional strategy. It's not. Garbage, transit, and sanitary sewers are. I can't vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Next in queue, it says staff 1. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, since I spoke prior to there being a motion on the floor, I promise that I won't say all those things that I said before. But I do need to refer to a document that we have, a staff report from 2008 on development cost charges. And part of that, and I have a question to staff, I have a couple of questions to staff. It indicates that development cost charges will be, and we have a council policy to review the development cost charges every 3 years. Could you please tell me when our last review of our development cost charges took place as it relates to this item?
Your worship, it was the report that you're referring to in 2008.
And we have a policy that indicates that we are to review every 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And on page 125 of that report, that's not on anybody's agenda, but other people may have it, as we were provided with it today, as it relates to the 25% assist factor, which was referenced earlier by one of my colleagues as a subsidy. And I think that that's what the reference was in relation to, is the 25% assist factor. And I'll just read this because I think it's important. The impact of the 25% assist factor is that additional borrowing of up to $15 million may be required to fund the long-term water supply plan. So by virtue of the fact that our assist factor is at 25%, not 1%, or we haven't reviewed it since this report in 2008, I think doesn't give us an opportunity to examine what the DCCs are and what they would be today versus 8 years ago in relation to this subsidy. And I believe that it's a very significant subsidy. While this may ultimately require increased user rates, it will not impact the anticipated 5% annual user rate fees increases in the near future. At the next DCC review in 2 to 3 years, which did not take place, Council can determine whether or not development has been deterred and could then reduce the assist factor if desired from 25 to something that would reduce the amount of the loan that we will have to take out in order to create an additional water supply. Further, I think that there was an Aerosmith coalition with Port Alberni and Parksville and Lanceville that was an option for consideration at one time by Lanceville that they chose to opt out of. So I think that there has been an option. I heard it stated by one of my colleagues that this is strictly a business deal. Well, I don't disagree with that. And if I was Lanceville, I'd be all over it. I don't think that they're going to say thanks, but no thanks. But what I will say, because it's a good business deal in there for them. And this is about development, make no mistake about it. And because I don't believe that this is a good business deal for the city of Nanaimo, this is not a vote for me against Lanceville. This is a vote for me in favor of Nanaimo in preservation of what is our most precious commodity that we cannot take for granted. And when I will say it again, the only part that I'll say of my opening remarks is that we're told by our professionals that sometime near 2020, and it moved to 2024, I don't know when it moved there, we run the risk of having a shortage of water, which we put ourselves in the same position that Lanceville's in today, apparently. So instead of it being you, it's going to be us. And when somebody suggests that 1.2% of the total volume of water that we have available to us is no big deal, when we've already got ourselves to a point of utilizing 92% of the water, or 90, or whatever that number is that we have, then 1.2% of what's available is a lot. It's a lot when you're getting down to all you have left. And as one of my other colleagues said, just simply as much as selling a cup of water, well, it ain't. So while I respect good neighbor agreements, and there's nowhere in the regional growth strategy when we raised our hand about urban nodes and build-outs, did we guarantee anybody water. There's nowhere that you will find in the regional growth strategy that says, not only do we encourage and support it, we will provide you water to make sure that you can do it. Nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I just wanted to bring some information into the debate, and that is that the region, including Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum, Lantzville, and the improvement districts, see water and our watershed and clean drinking water as a regional issue. We are involved in the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program. Perhaps Mr. Sims can tell me if I've got that right. And so, indeed, water is a regional issue. It is recognized as a regional issue, and we are working on it, not only regionally, but I think Vancouver Island has some interest in the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program. So it's not correct to say it's not a regional issue. It's been a regional issue for a while.
Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Chair.
One sec, please. It's, one sec, Ted.
No problem.
There, it's on.
Okay. I made some inquiries while I heard Councillor McKay say how much does Lantzville pay towards our hockey rinks, I think it was. And I'm on the Parks and Rec Commission. Actually, it's the Park, Rec and Environment Commission as the chair, and Chair Johnston and Councillor Paggi. And we have representatives from Lantzville, from Gabriel Island, from Cedar and Extension on the commission. And I did think that they gave money towards the Parks, Recreation, Environment budget. And, you know, I could be wrong, but I think it's about $300,000 that Lantzville gives towards our rinks or whatever it is. You can include aquatic center, rinks, parks, whatever you want, but it's a budget. So in fact, no, they do. They do give $300,000 to us. So just want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick. One sec, please. One sec. There.
Thank you. Just in our report, that people that have the report, it indicates that Lantzville contributes to the Port Theatre, it contributes to the NEDC, it contributes to the wastewater management scenario. My apologies, I don't have it directly in front of me of the 20, oh, here on page 60. Drinking water and watershed protection service and all other regional district Nanaimo services in which Lantzville and the city of Nanaimo are participating areas of the date of this agreement. So earlier today I asked what Lantzville's contribution to the city of Nanaimo is in this report, A, B, C, and D, in terms of dollars. And that, because, and not that I disagree with Councillor Greaves, it might be $300,000 for a myriad of things. But instead of throwing a number out there, it sounds like a lot. I would prefer not to do that. I gave staff a heads up earlier today that I'd be asking this question. I'm not sure if anybody has that answer for me.
Acting Mayor, the agreement that Lantzville, when we first started talking about an MOU, was that they would indeed commit to these areas, which would be economic contributions to economic development, the Port Theatre service, drinking water and watershed protection service, and as Councillor Bestwick just mentioned, all of the regional district Nanaimo services, which Nanaimo and the city of Nanaimo are participating at the date of the agreement. My understanding currently, these are commitments that they will move forward with if this agreement is ratified. They currently do provide, I think it's $5 per household for the drinking water and watershed protection services. And if Mr. Howitt can update me on anything further, that's the only one at this point, but these are the areas that they're committing to agree to contribute to if we move forward with the water agreement, which would lock them into providing those as part of the agreement.
Follow-up, Councillor Bestwick?
I didn't, I heard $5 per household. If there's 1,000 household, that's $5,000. So I didn't hear a response to any of the other items in terms of dollars or contribution. Because I heard 300,000. So
what they are commitments to discuss their contributions, and I believe they actually are making, and I'll let Mr. Howard follow up. I think they, as a show of good faith, they started to provide money for the Port Theatre in advance of the agreement actually being ratified, just with the MOU. Mr. Howard, do you have any further comments?
Acting Chair, when the economic development function was established by the region for the southern portion of District 68, our understanding is that Lantzville at that time didn't opt into that, but there's a commitment that they would under this agreement. With the Port Theatre, they've been making voluntary contributions to the Port Theatre, but they have not opted into the regional district contribution, which is what this agreement would tie them to do.
So thank you. Asking again, so we don't have numbers. We have voluntary participation, no numbers attached. It could be another $5 a household, or it could be some other number. And since they have to agree to it, then I guess they're going to be telling us what the number is. Now, have they stated to you in your discussions that if we don't do this, we're opting out? And it doesn't seem like it's a lot of dollars to me if they do, because this is a business deal.
Councillor Bestwick, I apologize. What they have said, of course, is that their commitment to these is part of the water agreement, and that was tied to the MOU in which Council directed staff to start discussing entering into this agreement. So they're basing that based on there's a commitment from Council that we are proceeding. So we haven't had discussions about if we don't have the agreement, they won't do it. We've just been proceeding with what would they do if the agreement was ratified by both councils.
They're already doing these things now anyways.
They're already doing the Port Theatre contribution.
And was that a one-time contribution in a sponsorship of a room or something?
No, it's an ongoing
Ongoing. Do we know what it is?
I don't have it with me, no.
Thank you.
It's a per capita costing, I think it is. It's a per capita costing.
No, it's not.
So, is it?
No.
Anybody else have anything to say? I would like to enter into some of the debate now. Is it a problem for council that I sit at this?
No, over here
So,
if you want.
I can back over there and somebody can chair it. So I'll go from here. Our most precious resource, and this is a problematic one for myself because I believe people do have some right to water. But my main concern is it's actually, I believe it's a bad business deal for Nanaimo and good for Lantzville. We have done a water audit for Nanaimo, but there's some questions within that from my own self. The RDN is currently working on a water budget for all of our areas, and it's quite a thick document. I'm happy to say that we hear in the agreement that it would be all costs for Lantzville, but on page 49, I think bullet 2 and 3 contradict each other almost. Because of this assist factor, I'm having a heck of a problem. Our water suppliers and our water drinkers have kicked in the extra 25% since 2008. This is a 2005 agreement. We're almost 10 years later. It's a 2008 assist factor based on an old economic value. The economy changed right around that time. We started in 2009 on naming our infrastructure and just started labeling the costs of our $2 billion worth of infrastructure. And we've collected DCCs up to this point that have helped us build our $70 to $100 million water treatment plant and our reservoir and the buildings that are associated with it. So I'm not happy with the buy-in value. The foothills in itself, when we voted for the RGS, I was under the understanding that the foothills was to look for its own water supply. Back in 2005, the original agreement was that foothills would look for its own water supply. So signing up to that or carrying that over for me is a tough one. I'm concerned with the user fee or the ability to mark up user fees or where they can send user fees to, because it's a bulk water supply. We have to have the ability to trust the metering, trust that they're accurate, trust that they're checked, trust that everything is done. Do we have any ability to infiltrate our own system and cause problems with backdrafting? When we say that we have to be consistent with their water supply. I don't like that terminology. It is equal or better to. And in fact, I believe Lanceville has a somewhat better system with dual check system backflow, where we don't have that in Nanaimo. All of their system has backflow. The assist factor means some 225 or 211 or 500 lots come in at about $2,000 cheaper, because then they'll make it up with their rates. But our people have made it up with their rates in Nanaimo. As I read through this, the regional service, it's a regional wish, but the purveyors of water, as we know, it's a sales pitch now. And our federation, I've questioned whether the federation is working out at the RDN a number of times over the last little while. We have now the city of Cedar wanting to be formed. So if we really are regional, then we dump all of these governments, form one regional government. We'd skip all the city governments. We wouldn't have a bureaucracy built up at every town level. We'd actually be a regional government, and it'd be the metropolis of Nanaimo or Oceanside. So to push the regional issue right now, where the RGS density inside of Nanaimo is just pushed so we can save the resource land. So I think this is a bad business deal, and that's why I can't support it on the reasons that are put in front of me, the consistency of our systems. And one other question to staff, who and how often does the Water Supply Committee meet? Because I've had a concern from one of the people we supply to that they were promised that they would have a meeting and been involved in meetings, and there hasn't been any for years. So what is this offer of this committee? Through the staff? How often has the committee met? Who is involved in the committee, and what's its mandate?
Your acting chair, I'll defer to Mr. Sims, but I don't believe they've met in the last year. Last
4 years?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not really a valid committee at that point in my mind. It doesn't have a mandate in that. So it's concerning for me. How long ago did Nanaimo join the Drinking Water Watershed Protection Committee? Within the last year and a half to 2 years? And it wasn't on it for a long time. The Drinking Watershed Protection has been going for a long time, and we only joined again, did we not? I think it was 2 years ago, I think. But we weren't always involved in it as a regional thing. We just joined now because of the economic development. We traded off. We asked them to come in on economic development in Parksville and Qualicum or whatever, and we joined the Drinking Watershed Protection. So it was like a trade-off. It doesn't seem to me like it's a great, let's get on this. We really wanted to be it. So for those reasons, I cannot support the deal as it exists. Thank you for listening. So, Council, we have a motion in front of us, 2 parts to it. One is that we approve the attached water agreement, and then circulate that. Oh, sorry, my screen went off.
Wanted to wrap it up.
Oh, Councillor Brennan, sorry, before we call the motion.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you press your mic again, please? I think you're on now.
Okay, thank you. Just one point of clarification I think is important, and that is the contribution to the Port Theatre. The agreement calls for Lanceville to make their contribution via the RDN function, and one doesn't get to just decide how much they're going to contribute. There is a set amount that's set in every year's budget. Currently, I'll just give you an example. Nanoose pays, in 2012, they would be paying $20,448. So there is a set fee, and it is significant. So I just wanted to make sure that none of us believed that Lanceville could pick a number out of a hat and say, this is how much we're going to contribute.
Do we have Lanceville's there?
Well, as we know, Lanceville hasn't been contributing via the RDN. This agreement would make that happen.
Thank you very much. Is there any further question? So I'll have to call the question. 2 motions. Is it 1 motion or 2 parts to the 1 motion?
It's 1 motion, Acting Mayor.
Okay, and that includes what we have here, the motion to approve the attached agreement to Lanceville, and the staff forward it to Lanceville for approval. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? I have Councillor McKay, Councillor Bestwick, and Councillor Kipp opposed. The motion carries. So we can call the mayor back in. Thank you very much for your patience, everyone. This is a very interesting issue, and appreciate the input. What's that? What's that? Well, can I start the next item? And then here comes the mayor here. So we're on corporate services right there, Your Worship.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Councillor Kipp. Much appreciated. We're now into item 8A, Corporate Services, Proposed Telecommunications Tower at 4700 Hammond Bay Road. And the purpose is to present Council with information regarding a request from TELUS requesting a letter of concurrence indicating municipal support for a proposed telecommunications tower at 4700 Hammond Bay Road be sent to Industry Canada. And we have two delegations, Mr. Michael Walsh from TELUS. Come forward, sir, or both of you if you wish.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Cheryl Longhurst, and I'm from Standard Land, agents for TELUS. This is Michael Walsh from TELUS. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present tonight. We'll be presenting on the proposed TELUS Tower, which is located at 4700 Hammond Bay Road. For about 3 years, TELUS has identified a need to improve service in the Hammond Bay area. Increasingly, the demand for data services is growing as more and more people are relying on their digital devices to access the internet, your iPads, iPhones, smartphones, and also for voice data. So as we look around the room, we can see that there are many digital devices sitting on the tables right now. So it's just an example of how prominent the use of these devices are. And this proposed tower will not only be used for TELUS, but Rogers and Bell as well, as Bell has an agreement to use TELUS's infrastructure. This proposed tower will service residences in the area as well as local businesses and institutional and emergency first responders who rely on this wireless network to do their work. And what you can see here is that the area currently has poor coverage. The green shows good coverage and the white is the poor coverage. And you can see once the tower is installed, the coverage improves significantly. And I just want to point out that TELUS's primary objective in moving this application forward was that they wanted to reach out and solicit information from the residents. And in doing that, they went beyond the requirements of Industry Canada and held a public open house, as well as extended the notification area. And from the public comments received, it was made clear that many of the residents acknowledge the poor service in this area, and several residents commented that this is a dead zone in terms of wireless services. So just to give you some background on how we found this site and why we think it's a reasonable site for a telecommunications tower. When coverage needs to be improved in an area, the first step is to identify an existing structure in the area. It can be a building, a BC Hydro tower, or an existing telecommunications tower. You can see here in the image, the closest tower is at Cottle Hill, which is over 2 kilometers away. This tower is simply too far from the Hammond Bay area to provide the coverage in the Hammond Bay area. As well, there are no existing structures that provide 30-meter height, which is required to offer service in this area. So without those structures, TELUS looked for a new site for a tower. And alternative sites were considered. In the middle, in yellow, you can see the proposed site at 4700 Hammond Bay Road. And there are alternative sites that were considered, including the Nanaimo Gospel Assembly. There was privately held lands west of McGuffey Road, and there was also the RDN Pollution Control Center that was considered. However, these sites did not have a willing landlord. And in finding an appropriate location for a new tower, it's important that TELUS find a location that is favorable to the community. And in this case, it's industrial and commercial areas. And as you can see here on the image, the commercial and industrial areas are located quite far away from the area that requires coverage, the Hammond Bay area. And the yellow is residential. This is primarily a residential area. TELUS has located its proposed site on the only commercial property within the Hammond Bay area. And just to point out, it is important to recognize that more and more the equipment for telecommunications is being located in residential areas because, in part, this is where the demand is coming from. So after 3 years of investigation, TELUS has put forth best efforts in finding a location and a design that minimizes visibility of the proposed tower. This site has appropriate zoning in that it's zoned commercial, and there are existing natural and built features on the site that provide screening of the tower to minimize the tower from views from the residential around the site, as well as from public view on Hammond Bay Road. So you can see that there are large trees that wrap around the north and east sides of the property, and there's a large parking lot with existing buildings. The proposed tower is set back away from the Hammond Bay Road, and the natural features of large trees and the existing buildings provide some screening of the views of the proposed tower. In addition, TELUS has further gone ahead with putting best efforts forward to minimize views of this tower by proposing a design that is a partially shrouded tripole design, and this design hides equipment from public views. Now, just to wrap up some summary comments, the proposed tower site will fill existing coverage gap, the dead zone, providing service to the community of Hammond Bay now and well into the future as the demand for wireless services continues to grow. TELUS has put forth best efforts to find a reasonable location and design for new telecommunications infrastructure that minimizes views by partially screening the structure from public views. Since 2011, TELUS has been working on a solution to service the area. Our hope is to provide improved service in 2014 by starting construction in the spring. TELUS is seeking support from the City of Nanaimo by requesting that the City of Nanaimo Council direct staff to provide a letter of concurrence in response to the proposed TELUS 35-meter telecommunications facility at 4700 Hammond Bay Road. And most importantly, TELUS is committed to working with the city and its neighborhoods in providing excellent service. And we welcome your comments and questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some questions. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Are you trying to tell me that the location that you are proposing is the one and only location for TELUS to deal with the dead zone, quote unquote?
This location meets the criteria.
No, that's not what I'm asking. Is that the only possible place for that tower to be?
Right
for
now?
For you to present the service that you want to present?
Currently, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just add the area is in the shape of a bowl geographically. The existing TELUS tower that was on one of the slides there is at the top of the ridge, which does not provide coverage to that bowl area. So essentially we need to be in the middle of it in order to provide the coverage.
Okay. Follow up, if I may, Your Worship. This city went into an agreement with Shaw to provide Wi-Fi services throughout the downtown core. And that is not being done, to my understanding, by way of a tower. That is being done by hanging devices at various and sundry light poles. Why could you not do something benign like that?
TELUS does do that in certain areas. The difference between Shaw's equipment and the TELUS equipment, Shaw is Wi-Fi only, similar to the system that you probably have in this building here. whereas we are trying to provide cellular coverage for phones as well as the data on those phones. There are systems available to us, but it's designed to add capacity to an existing cellular network. And in the Hammond Bay area, coverage is so poor that it's not merely trying to add capacity to an existing network. It's actually trying to provide coverage for the first time. So people in the area might notice that their phones sometimes work and sometimes don't work. We refer to that as a capacity issue. It's basically the number of people who are using their devices at any one time either enlarges the footprint, of a tower, or shrinks the footprint of the tower depending on how much bandwidth they're using. So, in answer to your question, those systems are available for TELUS, but in this particular area, the coverage is just too poor that it's not suitable.
Final follow-up. I think we're all aware that Industry Canada is changing the rules somewhat as to how you should engage the community. I asked our staff this morning what that meant, and I'd be interested to know how you would see those changes and how that would mean that you'd have to do things differently, obviously. Could you comment on that?
The changes that were proposed by Industry Canada essentially wouldn't have affected this particular proposal. TELUS, as good corporate citizens, try to engage at least the municipality on every installation that we do, whether it be a rooftop site, a tower less than 15 meters, which is what that Industry Canada amendment is trying to address, or a tower such as this, which is not meeting the existing criteria of Industry Canada. So in this instance, it wouldn't have affected the consultation at all.
Okay. Very final one. From where I sit, I'm being left with a percentage that I don't like very much, which is 60% against 40% of the population for. How do you think I should deal with that?
We actually see that as quite positive, actually, because most of the time that we stand here, the only people who go out of their way to speak for something is when they oppose it. To have 40% of the population go out of their way to actually write to us to say thank you for attempting to resolve this issue, we don't experience that very often at all.
Thank you.
We've got several questions, but I would like to ask myself, have you done a reasonable effort in trying to communicate with the residents in that immediate area to find out from them what their take is and what their level of comfort might be?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we believe we have gone out of our way in that we have gone beyond the scope of the Industry Canada requirements to consult with the public, and that we have expanded the notification radius to reach out to the community. We have also hosted a public open house, and we've reached out to the neighborhood associations. However, the Hammond Bay Association is not active, and the neighboring association was not active as well. So we didn't get to reach out by means of a neighborhood association, but we did try and make that step forward.
Okay, my question might be, when you reached out, how far did you reach? A matter of blocks, or what kind of geographical boundaries did you look at in trying to find out how the residents in the area were impacted?
In terms of contacting...
Yeah, I mean, the next door house, or a block away, or 5 blocks away. How large an area did you canvass, is what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm. So the Industry Canada requirements require 3 times the tower height in radius away from the proposed tower. We extended that notification radius to natural boundaries and to just include streets that made sense to us to include.
Okay, and I guess my final question is, what kind of reaction did you find from the people that you canvassed, by and large?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to put percentages to it. We received quite a bit of comment, a lot of feedback, and I would say that there is, yes, strong opposition for this. There is also strong support for it as well. And a lot of the times when people voice their opinions, it is like Michael has said, it is out of opposition, as we all know. And so it's important to represent the non-sayers and the people that didn't come forward and voice their opinion. And it is interesting in that the level of support was very, very strong. And this area, it was made clear that the area is a dead zone for cell service, and that impacts local businesses, it impacts the emergency first responders in this area, and it impacts the residents and their lifestyles.
Okay. You know, it's almost in a form of downloading. I always find it a little bit challenging that, you know, the various levels of government, and certainly in this case the federal government through Industry Canada, is putting the responsibility on us to hold these public meetings and do basically what I feel is their job. I think they should do a great deal more, and now that they're looking at it again, maybe they will do more in the future. But it's a little bit frustrating at our level where we're impacted by citizens that are directly connected and having challenges with it. And yet the ultimate decision is not ours. The ultimate decision belongs to the federal government through their section there. And I think it's just kind of challenging. I think that I'd like to see a lot more done by the federal government to involve themselves and hold these things. They just say, well, tell us what you think. Well, it's perhaps a little more convoluted than that. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate that. Thanks for your presentation. Clearly, I don't think anybody would dispute the fact that the service in that area is less than good. And then again, depending on who you talk to that's going there for a coffee or a beer, and they like going there because nobody can get to them. And from time to time, might be one of those that is quite happy that nobody can get to me. It's a good place to go. With that said, in our staff report, and it's asking for our council direction. And in some of the criteria, should we choose to proceed? And I'm sure you've read this, but it's bulleted that so I should ask you first, is there any impact to the Wally Creek as we know it space? Is there any impact whatsoever to that?
The Ministry of Environment has supported the proposal, considering that we will put forth the final plans and engineering drawings and fulfill their conditions.
So there will be then, with that reply, there will be an impact on the Wally Creek wetland as we know it today.
There will not be if we go ahead with and fulfill the conditions of the Ministry of Environment, and if we complete those obligations, then there will not be, and that's why they support the proposal.
So, because it says here in bullet point 2, implementation of a revegetation plan for Wally Creek and submission of an environmental assessment report, which reads to me that you have to replant, something, because there's going to be a physical impact to that space.
This is a previously disturbed area, and we are building on the previously disturbed area in the parking lot. So we are not going beyond the previously disturbed area in the construction of the tower.
Okay, thank you. And another question, if I may, Your Worship. Is there any, this is freestanding, there will be no guideline wires or anything reaching outward?
No.
Thank you. A question that you may or may not choose to answer. The landlord. What is the landlord's benefit to this siting?
I do not know the specific benefit, but obviously there's a financial benefit, and I'm a city planner myself, so I focus on the land use, and Michael can maybe answer the...
There's a statutory right-of-way agreement that we have with the landlord, and there's a license fee that's part of that agreement.
And it's assumedly paid on a monthly basis?
I believe this one's annually.
Annually? Are you at liberty to disclose what that is?
No, we're not.
I thought so. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bestick brought up the issue of the revegetation and the environmental assessment report. I find it interesting that we would, because after an area has been disturbed, as you said, that we would then come back later after it's kind of revegetated and whatnot, and now count that to be a new environmental area that we need to concern ourselves with. When you had your discussions with your landlord, or with the landlord here, were there any other considerations for anywhere else on the property for this to potentially site, or was it always in that back corner?
My understanding is that it's always been in the back corner, and the benefit of having it in the back corner is that it's set back further away from the Hammond Bay Road, which reduces the visual impact on from the public views.
Well, looking at the pictures, if you were to put it behind the garbage containers behind the building, you might find, up closer against the building, if I look at the street pictures, there's some fairly tall trees on the side of where the pub is that you'd almost have the same effect. I'm just concerned about, all of the assessment things and so on and so forth that may or may not be necessary if you were to move it over there, had there been any exploration there. That's all.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a very good point, and that's we are open to comments and considerations of design on the lot, absolutely.
Okay. But you were aware of these environmental assessments that are on our agenda here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Oh, thank you, Worship. This might be a little off base. Bear with me. And I don't know if you can answer it. Maybe staff can answer it, or either or. Now, we have a call answering levy on landlines of 47 cents a month, I believe.
Yes, on land.
Thank you. So,
is this a trick question?
It was a trick question. Thank you for answering that. So, we're trying to get mobile phones or cell phones to have a call answering levy charged to them as well, because you mentioned that the emergency services uses this area as well as cell phones for contacting the Central Island 911. And the 47 cents goes to that Central Island 911 PSAP, I think it's called. So, and I don't know, who is opposing that call answering levy on cell phones? Does TELUS oppose that, or does the industry oppose it, or is it for us to ask for it, and how does that happen?
Well, maybe, Mrs. Swayze, do you want me to start? Do you want to add something to it? I think what we should do is remember that, first of all, with respect to the delegation, they really weren't involved in that process.
No.
But what has happened is that the province of British Columbia is in the process now of determining a fair and equitable rate to apply right across the province. I don't want to get into all at how it reached that litigation and so on, but nonetheless, the province agrees to it, and the wireless communication, I forget the actual Canadian Wireless Telecommunication Association.
It's the CWTA.
Right, has also worked with us and indicated support for the project as well. So it will be moving ahead, and so I don't think we need to be concerned that it won't happen. It may not happen overnight, but I think the providers of the service will be paying a fee, not only for the landlines, which they are now, but for the cellular service in the future.
Okay, thank you, Worship. And I just, the reason I brought that up, of course, is because, well, this is for cell phones. Mm-hmm. And you would think that the cell phones, the people, the users, because they'll be using more and more cell phones and less landlines. And soon the Central Island 911 will not have a budget because there won't be any money to be given to them. So I just thought that, TELUS or Bell or Rogers were opposing that. So, no, thanks very much.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, the CWTA actually represents TELUS and Rogers. So.
Okay, thank you.
Nationally.
Thank you.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I noticed in your report concerns raised in opposition that the majority of the concerns raised were with regard to the health and safety of the area, because you're proposing to put this in a residential area and in very close proximity to a kindergarten and to residences. When that concern is raised, does that not make you I have no idea how many calls you could get in support of having it, but I can certainly tell you that I have had very few people emailing me or phoning me to say they don't have good service, but I've had a great number of people calling to say they're very concerned about the close proximity of this cell tower to their children. So that, for me, I am a servant of the people. That's how I view my role. And when I have this passionate plea by people saying, please don't allow this to happen, it raises a big concern for me. And yet you say that you're in compliance with the Canada Health authorities.
That's correct.
So could you comment on that?
Could I comment on the authority?
Yes.
Well, TELUS is regulated by Industry Canada. Industry Canada looks to Health Canada to determine what is a safe level of exposure to radio frequencies and electromagnetic fields. The document that is that Health Canada has put together is called Safety Code 6, which was established in 1979. And it's been revised several times since then, most recently in 2009. And it has consistently said that the exposure of mobile phones and their base stations do not pose a health concern to humans if the equipment, whether it be a phone or a tower, meets the standards of Safety Code 6.
I read recently a report that the FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, has taken another look at this, the siting of cell towers and the height of cell towers and the proximity to residential neighborhoods. This is preceding that, what might become a new regulation. But I would like you to know that we have proposed as a council that a bylaw be passed to regulate the siting of cell towers in residential neighborhoods. We haven't received that bylaw yet, but that will be forthcoming.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions from council. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the next delegation is Dr. and Mrs. Fred Dow. It's actually Dr. Fred and Mrs. Carol Dow. Welcome.
The better half is going to speak first, and then I get 5 or 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We are here representing the Hammond Bay residents that surround this proposed 35-meter, 115 feet, 10-story cell tower. It's my understanding the conference center we're sitting in is approximately 3 stories high. This tower would be 7 stories higher than we are. According to engineers, this proposed 500-watt industrial tower could have Bell and Rogers adding even higher wattage, and I believe that was said just a moment ago, in the middle of 2 very large elementary schools, the Frank Ney and Hammond Bay School, preschool of some 50 students, a kindergarten, 2 churches, and a Hungarian culture center. And the regional district, as we know, we've all spoken and have turned down this proposed tower by TELUS. We bring these points to you. 1, we are not against the idea of a cell tower, but instead there could be other ways to give coverage which TELUS does not choose to consider. For example, smaller antenna can be placed on existing power poles, but this location is much too vulnerable and sensitive to our children and families and wetlands. The tower could be in the Lindley Park area, which has TELUS desired height naturally. Please turn down this unsuitable location for a cell tower at Piper's Pub. 2, please insist that the property mitigate and repair the wetlands as to bylaw 4500 subsection 6.3, and that is to do with riparian concerns. Piper's parking lot already got a variance to build over peat on part of the wetlands, and now more variances would have to be given. Bit by bit, it gets eaten up. We need to realize the environmental impact and protect Wally Creek also from vandalism, as evidenced by other mishaps per the police file number 2013-3107, and that was where the propane tanks were leaking. We do not want to see the riparian rights abused. We strongly ask that you not give a variance as requested by TELUS. 3, we are asking why TELUS misrepresented the drawings as not to be 115 feet high and made it look approximately 35 feet high in their drawings at the information meeting. 4, we ask that you pass a resolution asking for Industry Canada to place a moratorium on all cell towers and antenna until Health Canada's Safety Code 6 is updated. 5, 100 surrounding homes were notified of impending proposed tower by regular mail saying occupant and did not receive proper notification by being personally addressed, according to the requirements by Mr. Moore, the Director of Industry Canada, which was recently aired on CBC, a TV announcement. He also mentioned in St. John's that there was an example given of a municipality turning the telecommunications down because of the location being close to elementary school and senior housing. You can do the same. West Vancouver and Langley municipalities have also cited an antenna site protocol. I personally looked up all the BC assessment ownerships of these 100 addresses where these letters were sent. I asked TELUS to provide me with those addresses. And the ownerships, and I found that a large number of these owners had not received a letter from TELUS. Somewhere in the vicinity of 70% did not. We did not. And we live closest probably to that tower, just on the other side of Wally Creek. In fact, on the list that was given to me, it was addressed our address on Logan's Run, and then the city was AIMO. We did not get a letter, but that's how it was listed on the address information given to me by TELUS. TELUS indicated in their proposal to the City of Nanaimo they would provide a summary of the feedback letter from us. I do not see it in their presentation. Where are the letters we wrote them stating we were against the tower? We sent copies of these letters to our council, to you. And we are concerned this process is not an arm's length, and we're concerned about the accuracy. I'd also like to give you just a portion. I believe some of you have this from Industry Canada, from the director stating, I'll just quote it from him, Mr. Kevin Hartley, the director in Victoria. It is important that local governments play a central role in influencing where a new antenna is to be installed in their community. Municipalities can ensure that local residents are at the center of the process that will help determine the location of a new antenna in their community. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor and Council, we ask that you please save our wetlands and Wally Creek, our children and families, and provide cell coverage in another way and in a better location. Vote no to this cell tower. Thank you. And I now give you my husband, Dr. Dow.
I also would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, and the city staff, too. There's been a lot of work done since we were last here, and it's quite evident. We thank you also for hearing us once again. Evidently, Canada's cell towers are going to increase by 1/3 to service the new 4G network that's being promoted this year. Evidently, all new cars or non-budget new cars are going to have 4G network connections. And this requires these new cell towers. So this problem is going to come up many more times than today. I'd like to mention that everyone keeps calling us, or at least TELUS calls us a dead zone. My cell phone works, my friend's cell phone works for phone calls. What they don't work for too well is connecting to the web. And that's very spotty and slow. So I think it'd be a better term to call it a sick zone rather than a dead zone. Our summary points for asking you to vote no to this standard land TELUS Rogers Bell proposition are: 1, TELUS is using a very flawed safety code by world standards to justify their placement and the power of their proposed tower. It wouldn't pass muster in most of the rest of the world. The Safety Council is now being revised with their new chairman and new members because of the history of how the safety code was developed in the first place. And the preliminary new code is going to be released on March the 14th, and it's being released for further public input. Their standards are just based on how much the radiation will heat a square centimeter of your skin. It does nothing to address the microwave, the cumulative microwave damage to a body, especially to a child's head. The cell phone companies have other options, and this has been mentioned by you folks a little bit. They can have these little mini towers on poles. They could put it up on Lindley Ridge above the area we're talking about. They'd naturally get their 115 feet up there. And they don't give good answers as to why they won't consider it. They just have told me, oh, we aren't considering that. So I suspect it has to do with cost. And we would recommend municipalities find independent telecommunication consultants to give unbiased opinions on what can or can't be done. The safety code's being revised. The Ministry of Industry just last week came out with a new protocol for cell towers, and there are many municipalities concerned with the new towers being proposed. It's all over the internet. So we do not think there's any rush to establish new towers before more of this problem is worked out. The process TELUS uses is very undemocratic. Sending letters to a very small percentage of the households affected and addressed to occupant is not proper notification. Having TELUS in charge of collecting, summarizing, and advising on their own proposal is rather disingenuous. To modify an old saying, you don't ask the fox to design the hen house and place it.
Okay, Dr. Dow, if you could wrap it up fairly soon, sir. The time is up. 10 minutes is up.
Okay. So
I might point out that your wife had 6 minutes and you had 4 minutes.
Well, that's
fitting.
That's
your issue,
that's
not mine.
fitting, isn't it? So, thank you for hearing us, and you've heard it all before, and you evidently have considered most of this. We're mostly concerned about also about the riparian rights. We've got beaver, herons, fish, even rare beetles in Wally Creek.
Okay, sir.
And they can't be here to talk for their neighborhood.
Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we have some questions from Council. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, when this first came up, I thought I would start doing some research on it, and I did so based on the fact that it probably won't be the last time that this item came up. So I started to look over at West Vancouver, and I looked at Langley. In Langley, when they had an application in front of them last September, they came out with a new protocol, and their protocol basically just expanded the consultation area from 3 times the height to 500 meters. So it's about a kilometer in diameter. One of the things they did say at the time was that they found that in most cases you would normally see about a 10% agreement if you went out and polled people. And I have to admit, if BC Hydro knocked on my door right now and asked me if I wanted a 40-foot power pole with a transformer on it and a bunch of wires and stuff hanging off of it in front of our house, I'd probably say no, purely from an aesthetic point of view. But we've got them. So in any case, in Langley, one of the things they demanded was an 80% approval rating in that area. 80%. When TELUS says quite openly that you're lucky if you get 10 of approvals. So West Vancouver, I spoke to a councillor from West Vancouver to find out what happened with the ones up on the Upper Levels Highway. On the Upper Levels Highway, there were 3 large towers, 3 different carriers, and the project had nothing to do with them other than the fact that they were the governing municipality. That was a relationship between the carriers and Ministry of Transportation and Highways, where the land was to go on. One of the things they've done in their protocol was they've looked at a proven need. So in that particular case, they looked at it and said, well, you've not given us any significant evidence that there's a proven need in that area because of it being a blind spot or being a dead zone, if you will. So they turned it down at that particular juncture. But I think they've got one of the best protocols that I've seen so far of the limited research I've done on those. With health, I thought, okay, I found it interesting that both in Toronto, where they have a protocol, their medical health officer in Toronto has tried numerous times to get the health authority to drop the very restrictive items on the protocol relative to health issues, because there are none in his view. I then looked at the Langley application. In Fraser Health, their local medical health officer advised Langley Township Council of the same thing, that you should not be doing this because there are no health issues that you should concern yourself with. So I thought, okay, well, I'm getting all of this information from people who are sending all kinds of stuff from the internet. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to get a hold of our local medical health officers. So I contacted Paul Hasselback, the medical health officer for Central Island, for Island Health, and he states, and I've sent a copy of this to all of council so they have it, because of public concern, the issue of health impacts of RF is one that receives ongoing scrutiny and considerable public policy interest, and one that is monitored provincially and nationally. My office tries to remain current based on inquiries such as this. He goes on to say, my more recent experiences suggest that while there is some public concern, the evidence balance has clearly shifted such that health concerns are not a rationale for not approving such applications. There are other dominating issues, such as the aesthetics, well, I get that one, that are more relevant. If you'd like to discuss further, please let me know. So then we had a number of neighbors on this particular application that were talking about property values. So I thought I would investigate property values. There's a 57-unit, 2-phase housing development on Labio Road, just almost next door to the Co-op Center up on Bowen and Labio. And so I thought I'll contact the selling agent on that particular on those properties, and I asked the question, were any of the prices of the units within those 2 complexes based on a lower value because of the fact that immediately overhead on the backside of a piece of property on Sinar Drive, there was about a 100-foot cell tower. And the agent who claimed he had been there for 2.5 years of sales, doing open houses, that no, it was not, the pricing was not based on there being a cell tower right there. So I asked the question, did anybody during the time that you were doing open houses bring it up as a significant issue and try to get a discount on the property because there was a cell tower there? Or even bring it up? He said, well, I can only speak for myself, but I did the majority of the open houses, and in 2.5 years of being there on site, not once did I ever have anyone even mention it. So I thought, okay, well, that's straight from the horse's mouth. One of the things that he did say of that particular property was, while that property had gone through its ups and downs during the low cycles in the last little bit of market adjustment we had, the last half of that development, notwithstanding the fact that there was a cell tower immediately above it, the last half of that sold before foundations were laid. That was very unique for Nanaimo. It was priced right, it was the right product, in the right location, etc., even though there was a cell tower there. My biggest worry on this one here is the first response. Industry is telling us that over 60% of the people nowadays do not, over 60% of the calls that are being made to 911 right now are being made through cell phones. And when I was speaking to a local real estate office, I was asking, how many people in your office have landlines? And in that particular real estate office, they had 5 people in there. Only 1 had a landline. Everybody else had given up their landlines. My concern would be, imagine if you will, we're talking about building a fire hall out there so that we can better our response times to that neighborhood. What happens if you have no landline and you can't get a hold of first responders? What happens if there's an emergency and volunteers are required that live in that area that we can't get a hold of to help with emergencies in other parts of the community? That's a real challenge and a real public safety concern in my mind. So what's the point of building a new fire hall out in Hammond Bay Road if somebody in the area can't get a hold of anybody to contact them in the first place, can't get a hold of 911? A real concern with that. So I can't, to quote Dr. Hasselbeck, I can't see not concurring with this application. They've done everything that they've been asked to do. They've gone over and above. We see in our report that they were only required to contact 8 people based on Industry Canada regulations. They did 92 or 98. This is the 3rd time. The other 2 didn't go anywhere. Well, I can't see any reason to deny it. So, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Batchelor.
Thank you, Worship. Useful information, Councillor McKay, and thank you for that. But I do want to remind you that the folks who are opposing this are not opposed per se to the placing of towers. They just want it in a different spot. And they want to see some other options that they are aware of. So I think that was a fair comment on their part. But nevertheless, thank you for all the information that you have gathered. In the first paragraph of the request for council direction, the 3rd bullet down, it requires a water course variance that would be required for the proposed tower within 15 meters of the wetland boundary. And with all due respect to the presenter, the fact that the wetlands have been abused once doesn't necessarily make a very good case for doing it one more time. So I really can't accept that portion. Last week, at the invitation of Councillor Brennan, who chairs the advisory committee on environmental issues, she invited me to come and sit in on, because the committee was going over a draft version of the riparian issues that we are going to be dealing with. And I can tell you from the 2 hours that I spent there, what is coming your way in riparian issues is going to be a little stricter than what we've been used to up until this point. So I already know myself that if number 1 would pass, I would never be able to vote in a variance that would reduce the riparian setback from Wally Creek. So for me, that whole thing is already a moot point, and it is of no value to me. So, Your Worship, at some point, and I'll leave it to your discretion when you allow me to do it, but I intend to make a motion with regards to number 2.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is I'll come back to you on that point now. There's still some other questions yet. Councillor Brennan.
Well, actually, I was going to make the motion with regard to number 2, so that we would at least have something to debate. I don't know.
Okay. Then, you know, what I was going to point out is that basically council has 3 options: a letter of concurrence for this particular site, a letter of non-concurrence for this site, and the third alternative is a letter of no comment to Industry Canada. Having said that,
Okay, well, I would move that council direct staff to provide a letter of non-concurrence to Industry Canada in response to a proposed 35-meter telecommunications facility at 4700 Hammond Bay Road. And if I could speak to that then,
yes,
Your Worship.
please.
There's a few things that I like about the proposal from TELUS. I like that you want to deal with the dead zone. I think that's important to our community. And those of us who've become used to their cell phones, it is really irritating to be anywhere and be unable to connect. It just feels, you've just become used to it. So I like that TELUS is taking a look at this and saying, how can we deal with that dead zone? I like that the proposed tower, that there's an attempt to minimize the visibility, because I think that in a neighborhood, to have a 35-meter tower would be, would not, it just doesn't fit into residential neighborhoods. So I think it would be an eyesore, and people are understandably upset about it. What I don't like is that this requires a development variance. I think Councillor Padgey's right in the way that he talks about it. Because there was a disturbance to Wally Creek in past years, doesn't mean that there isn't now an ecosystem that's grown up there. And once again, to do this, we would be disturbing that. The riparian setback regulation, or the riparian leave strip, as we starting to call it, the very first step that the Environmental Committee is proposing is that you sit down with the developer and work on ways that the development could take place without requiring any variance. That would be the number one step, is let's look at this and see if we can't accommodate your development without requiring a variance to allow a disturbance to a watercourse or a wetland. This proposal hasn't done that. So there hasn't been any contemplation as to how can we do this without any disturbance. What I see here is, how can we do this, and by the way, we're going to require a variance because we're going to disturb. And to me, that's backwards. That first conversation has not taken place, and it needs to take place. So long as that is one of the requirements for this, I don't need to go beyond that. I don't need to go to health and safety or even, in fact, the visibility. When I get to the environmental impact, I stop. It's like, no, go back, please, to the drawing board and either find another location where you're not going to be requesting a variance to disturb a wetland or a watercourse, or figure out a way of doing this that doesn't require it. So that's why I am recommending a non-concurrence.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I would certainly support the non-concurrence motion. At the RDN level, I voted to disallow or not allow a cell tower in that same location. My view hasn't changed. I would always want to err on the side of caution with regard to cell towers. And by delaying this and allowing TELUS to go in and look at an alternate site, the new protocol for cell towers may be in effect by then, and I think that's the way to go. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. I see no further questions from council on the matter. It's been moved and seconded for item 2, the letter of non-concurrence to Industry Canada. Sorry, Councillor Kidd, go ahead.
Your Worship, is it that we want the non-concurrence at this site? At this site.
Yeah.
So we want to continue.
Is the motion specific? It should be site-specific on that.
It is, yeah, it says on that. So my only concern that we're just saying, okay, we're turning this down, but what is the future? Are we sending it back to committee? Are we sending it, or looking for a report from ACES or DPRC? What is along with it? So we're saying no to this site. Now we've said no now to, this is the third site we've said no to. The health issues, I know, they've been put aside. Aesthetics is really what we're dealing with now, and the riparian zone. So do we need to send this motion and then send it back for more information from staff? Or, because I'm still, just by saying no to this, we're saying no, pick another site? Is that the motion? Thank you.
When I made the motion, it was no to this site, balls in TELUS's court. Let them make the decision on how they'll proceed beyond this. But it really is their ballgame.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. My question is to staff. Can you please explain to me how, on a piece of disturbed land, we now find ourselves requiring a variance?
Your Worship, it can happen in one of two ways. Either the original development received a variance for that specific improvement, in case there could have been a watercourse setback for a reduction in the watercourse to allow for the development as proposed. The second way it can happen is the conditions can change, and there can be, as with wetlands, they can evolve and change, and as we define them, can change. So we could have a case where a development complies with the setbacks of the day, but either the site, excuse me, the site changes or the bylaws change. And I believe that there's a potential here that the conditions around this property have changed since the original development was proposed. The development of the day looked at the watercourse setback 15 meters from the creek itself, and I now think that the area directly adjacent to the parking lot would be considered a wetland under our bylaw today.
The wetland wasn't there before?
Your Worship, I don't know whether the original, I'd have to go back and look at whether the original development permit for the pub and the parking lot included a variance, in which case it would have been very specific for the parking lot. Any other development in that area would require another variance like we're talking about. Or there's a case where the area that's a wetland and considered a wetland today wasn't evaluated or considered a wetland at the time of the original development.
Okay, so supplemental, if I may. So it looks like we're looking for reasons not to allow this. That's what it looks like to me. Fact is, there's a parking lot there. There's a development there. They're staying on the within the parameters of the development. Now, something has encroached upon it, perhaps, but I find it hard to believe, and I'm not hearing an answer as to whether or not there was a variance way back when. I'm hearing councillors saying, I'd be okay with it if there was no requirement for a variance.
Your Worship, maybe I can take a further crack at this one. Whether there was or there wasn't a variance, if you proceed with developing this site for the tower as proposed, it requires a building permit. And that's a further encroachment into the wetland that council would have to consider issuing an aquatic variance for. So regardless of how we got here, it requires a variance now for any further development, and that's the situation that you're in.
Okay, if I might. So the question would then be, if the proponent or the applicant could secure a different location on this current site that got it away from the 15 meters, would this site be acceptable? There'd be no variances required other than the parking lot. Parking.
Your Worship, of course, that's not a question for staff, that's a question for council.
Okay.
You're done.
So then, for council, would this site be acceptable if it was not? I'm hearing all kinds of people talking about the creek.
Well, I think
So if it was
before
tucked up against the building, would that be okay?
Yeah,
Would we be okay with that?
What I think we need to do, though, is deal with, there's a motion on the floor to support or reject item 2. And so I think we really need to do that, and if it passes, it does. If it fails, then we can look at other options.
Well, we've got the applicant in the audience right now. So I would like them to go away tonight with some sort of course. Do they go out looking for another site? This is their third kick at this can.
You understand?
So the question is there some place on that site that'll get them away from the 15 meters? If we give them instructions, get away from the 15 meters, you'll be fine. We'll approve it.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick and then Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. A lot of sort of rhetorical, subjective stuff. You know, if they were away from this, would we or wouldn't we? And 3 times, and some people have to run for 4 elections before they get elected. So, you know, 3rd time, not so lucky.
Let's stay away from that.
So, I was sorry, Your Worship. I was trying to bring a little levity to this thing, but I'm not in a position to say if it was recited somewhere else and to make that decision tonight. But I think that the proponents, if we choose not to support this one, will leave with the reasons because of the water course and the ecosystem and so on, and perhaps a different location on that site might work. I'm also hearing that there's alternatives to 5 or 10 or 15 foot tower that might be able to put antennas on telephone poles and different apparatuses that may or may not be economically feasible. I don't know, but right now we're only dealing with what we can deal with and not what might be, and so for that reason, I can't support Councillor McKay's ask at this time.
Okay, Councillor Patchy has a question, or makes. But before you do, I'm just going to make a quick statement here, if I can.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that this is a very difficult thing. I think it is difficult for all of council, but I'm going to support the letter of non-concurrence on this as well, the motion which is on the floor right now. And while I understand that TELUS has spent a lot of time and probably a great deal of money in trying to develop a site, and I recognize that there is a huge communication problem for cell phone users in particular in that area. But I would like to think that more needs to be done to find out, first of all, what other options there might be on this. I know 3 is a huge number and 3 is a huge expense, but I'm personally not comfortable with it. I'll support the non-concurrence on that as well. Councillor Patchy.
If I may ask a question to staff to try and respond to Councillor McKay's the possibility that he has raised. It is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when this property was sold the last time around, that it was sold with a specific right of way to this particular corner. Are you aware of that?
There is a right of way on the property in favor of TELUS. In generally the location that's being proposed for the tower, I don't know exactly when that was registered with respect to the property transaction.
That's my understanding, at least.
Okay. Councillor Kip.
Well, this is bad. Maybe I should let it go, but we're worried about that little corner of Wally Creek, and we're going to tear out Colliery Dam. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's question on the motion. The motion on the floor is item 2 on the agenda there, and we'll call all those in favor. Opposed? We have Councillor, sorry, Councillor McKay opposed, and balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Moving into the Park Dedication Bylaw 2014, number 7182. Purpose is to dedicate recently acquired parkland through bylaw. Staff recommendation that motion the council receive for information the report regarding park dedication bylaw 2014 number 7182. And I think I should just point out that this is really more, Mr. Swaby, I think of a housekeeping thing. This is to do with some land that the city acquired possession of through property exchange, and we're simply trying to commit this to dedicated park use, and but we do require a 2/3 affirmative vote to carry it.
So motion to receive the report?
I'm just there was a question.
Your Worship, you are absolutely correct. This is good news in terms of completing on the acquisition of parkland and bringing it in as per council's policy as designated as park.
Okay, so does someone want to? Did you move? Yep. Second. Second. Move in second. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion.
Park Dedication Bylaw 2013, number 7182, pass first reading.
Moved in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I move the Park Dedication Bylaw 2014, number 7182, pass second reading.
Moved in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion
I
carries.
move the Park Dedication Bylaw 2014, number 712, pass third reading.
782. All those second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So and we received the 2/3 requirement on that one, so we're happy. So we'll move into number 9, community services. 9A, Colliery Dam engineering consultant expenditures. Purpose is to update council on the engineering consultant expenditures for the research and planning phases 1 and 2 related to developing options for the remediation of the Colliery dams. And we have a delegation, Mr. Jeff Solomon. Welcome, sir.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been a while, so it's and it's a good opportunity for an update, I believe. While work is being done by the technical committee, and it's coming along quite well, I believe, and we're going to have something really more concrete to present in the next short while. But in the interim, I felt it was really important to bring up an issue that I just felt needed to be clarified for both council and the general public as well. We've heard from quite a number of people in the community that are very, very confused regarding the water levels at the dam and the emergency procedures that are in place. Even today, we heard from someone who was concerned because there was quite a lot of snow, as everybody knows, and whether or not that would have any impact in terms of the water levels and possible affecting the dam. So I really wanted to clarify things. This was January 11th of this year, so about a month ago. Now, this is a typical winter rain that we've had many times, and you can see there's significant water in the spillway. This is, of course, the difference this time around, of course, it was very simple, is that this became front page news as being of extreme concern and close to a panic situation, and that was the unusual part. This is the marker in the middle of the spillway, and as you see, this is where the water was on January 11th. It was at 40 centimeters. Okay, now here, point 6. This is where emergency procedures are said to be to begin. Here is the top of the is the spillway, and up here, this is where the dam is. This is the top of the dam. Okay, there are many people and perhaps even some people on council, that don't understand the difference. That if the water goes over here, which is very, very difficult for it to come to this level, this is the middle of the spillway. This has nothing to do with overtopping the dam. And it's very important to know that you'd have to go up 3 more feet of water, 3 feet, for it to approach the top of the crest of the dam. That's what we need. We want people to know. They look down in the spillway and they're concerned because the water's high in the spillway. It really has nothing to do with overtopping of the dam. So in summary, it's only the overtopping of the dam that's the concern for the lower dam failing. If this were to occur, it wouldn't be within minutes, it wouldn't be within hours, it would be within days, okay? The bottom of the spillway, the very, very bottom, is 2 meters below the top of the dam, the crest of the dam. The middle of the spillway is more than 3 feet below the crest of the dam. If the water were to go over the spillway, it is still more than 3 feet below the top. The water has we've been told that the water has only reached 90 centimeters right here once in the last 34 years. And that's still 1.1 meters below the top of the dam. So basically, I'm pointing this out because it's been brought up and a lot of people are very confused about the issue. And we simply want council to understand this. And also we want the residents to understand and to be assured that even the very, very heaviest winter rains have never approached this level of water at the dams. So we do certainly expect that we will be fine for the course of the remainder of the winter. So I just needed to bring that up, and I appreciate you taking the time to look at that. Of course, this is our park, as everybody knows. It's a beautiful park. But now is the time to talk a little bit about the technical committee and where we're at. I think it really has been a very positive process, and I think there's been a lot of good elements that have gone into this. We have really good people involved. I think Catherine Gordon has been an excellent facilitator, and she's really helped to bring this people together and to help with the planning for what's to occur. So we're very, very fortunate to have her. As well as I want to say that we have a very excellent engineering firm involved. Golder was unanimously approved by the staff, SUNEMO, and our society as being the best candidates for this particular job. And for lots of reasons. The head engineer on this project has more than 45 years experience in engineering. He's a damn expert, you know. And I keep telling him, gee, Herb, please do not retire until we figure out what to do with the dams. He says, no problem, I'm with you on this. So we have very, very good people involved. And so I want to assure you that we, from our society, we may be able to add quite a bit, and we do. We have some, I think we do add some technical experience to that, and as well as some personal knowledge about the dam, about the park. But it's the experience of these dam engineers and what they bring to the table. These are the experts, and we have them, and we're going to get the right answers here. You've noticed, and everybody's concerned about cost as well as we should be, okay? We need to be. It's a big factor, and you've already got the cost estimates up to this stage of the game, and of course there's more. You know that there's been some serious testing at the dam, at the lower dam. This, by the way, oh, excuse me, sorry. This, well, I don't know where I am here. This, when you look at the picnic table, that's the dam. That's where the dam is. The spillway is on the other side, okay? That's our dam, 3 feet above. Anyway, there was a lot of testing at the lower dam, actually just finished about a week ago, the core drilling, as well as the sampling and the surveying. So a lot of this testing, you're wondering, Some people are saying, well, why are you doing the testing? And because a lot of this information isn't on record. They do not have the information that they need to make the decisions that they need to have. They need the correct information to make proper decisions. Some of the studies are valid, and some information they've been able to get some from the studies, but they do not have some very, very basic information, including the actual dimensions of the dam, where the bedrock is, what's in the fill behind the dam, the reinforcement in the concrete core, how strong the concrete is. There's a lot of factors here, and each of those factors is very, very significant in terms of deriving the options that they'll come up with. So they are doing this work, and some of it is expensive. The core drilling, they were there for the entire week, and they had 2 huge machines there, and they churned up some of our park. But they needed to do that because they need those samples, and they need to analyze those samples so they can bring back some information. It's not just what's in the dam, but how it's shaped and how the water will go through there. I'm not the one to talk about that, but we have people that will be able to do that with you. They are taking very due diligence in covering this, because they know as well, this is not a secret. This is a very high-profile situation right now, and there's been a lot of involvement, and they need to take all the steps that they need to do to make sure that they've got the correct answers. The other part of the study is, and you've probably heard in the public updates from Catherine, there is a risk analysis. It's a very important factor right now, and it's being done for our 2 little dams. Okay, now they're 2 of the smallest dams probably in the province, but there's been concerns about the impact from these dams should they fail. The risk analysis is a key component here in terms of qualifying the risk that we have. This isn't something that happens just in the city of Nanaimo, or it would happen in any district to look at the risk and liability of the governing body. These things do occur because it's part of the process. It's part of the responsibility of every governing body. So it's not just for Nanaimo. It's not just for our colliery dams. It's for the regional district because there's numerous dams in the regional districts. It's for the entire province because there's 1,650 dams in the province. We have the dam safety brand sitting in on some of the meetings because they're very interested in this process and the risk analysis, and they want to be more informed about it because it's very applicable for other situations.
We're over time, but we have some questions for you. And I'll let you finish off, and then we'll have a question.
Would it be all right if I just had 30 more seconds?
30 seconds, you got.
Okay, thank you. So what we're doing is March the 4th, they're coming back, and we'll have some more information. And I need to let you know that what I'm asking for from the technical committee is a public forum down the line for the council and for the public to hear directly from the engineers. So we'll be talking about that on March the 4th as well. I think that is extremely important, that you have the opportunity to speak directly to these expert people who are involved. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, a couple of questions for you. Councillor Patchy.
Very quick one. Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for the update. A couple of weeks ago, I met with Robin Hunter and yourself for a very short period to listen to the concerns that you expressed in conjunction with the first part of your presentation, that is the measurements of what comes into effect what.
Yeah.
At that point, I did call Ms. Hunter back and told her that I had relayed those fears to staff, who then contacted me, and since basically the same questions had been asked of Karen Lindsay, our manager of emergency response, was it okay if the response came from her, which I agree to.
Yes.
You've seen the responses,
yes,
and I would like to hear from you how those are received.
I'm glad she answered the questions. We are in disagreement with some of the measures that were taken with regards to the emergency measures, and we weren't involved in most of the planning with regards to that. I mean, we have 70 signs down here, down in our neighborhood, and people are so confused about the signs because they go half a block and they say turn, here's the exit, here's the entrance, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. So I won't go into the specific answering each question, but I was glad to receive a response, and we are basically in disagreement about how this should have been handled. I think I should leave it at that at this stage of the game.
Thank you.
Councillor Kidd.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for your effort and your community passion. You talked about the width of the dam. Has it been significantly reduced in length? Because I originally think it was like 100, was it 110 meters across or something, and now it's...
Okay.
Can you speak to that?
If you go through the studies, there's a variety of measurements that have come out through the studies, but basically they've gone through 77 meters as the crest of the dam. Now, we've always questioned that, whether or not, because if you look at this, we've always thought that the dam ends here. Well, what they're measuring is from here, the tree, which everybody enters, and they go all the way across to the spillway, right here. Well, we never thought that that was the actual dam, but we don't know exactly where the bedrock begins and where the actual dam is. So the testing is to confirm that. 77 meters, a lot of the studies were done on that, and possibly more. But I don't have the results of the survey. This is going to be brought back to us on March the 4th. We should have a lot of the results in the analysis from the survey, which they use GPR, ground penetrating radar, as well as the core drilling to find out exactly the parameters. I think in any renovation, I mean, I hate to do lay terms, but any renovation, I think you start with one thing. You got to know what you have, how big it is. I mean, there's certain costs per foot, and labor costs as well as materials, as well as how the water would be affected in terms of if things went awry. So I think it's a really, really good, important place to start.
And that will affect, as you said, the risk assessment, and the risk assessment's been reanalyzed?
Well, no, there wasn't a risk assessment done before. Some of the hydrology study has been redone, and because they needed to do that. It was remember what we're looking at. If you don't know what you have, then you make an assumption. And the assumption is on the absolute worst case scenario. And then you draw that, it's not based on a fact. It's based on, it's a very big guesstimate. It has a huge wide range. So what they're doing is trying to qualify all of that information and to be able to say exactly what they have, because that's very difficult to do. We have much more information, I believe, on the middle dam because there was much more extensive renovations done. They had stripped the whole back side of the berm. There was very little berming, so they replaced the entire berm on the back side. And it's also very easy to measure pretty much what we have in terms of a measurement of the crest of the dam at the middle. This one is different. It's there was a lot less information known, just a whole lot of guesses.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for your update and technical update, which to me has been very helpful and excellent. Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the height of the water when there was an appearance to the general public about its worries and concern, and I want to ensure that we all understand how much more water was required before we were on a red phone alert. That seemed to put a lot of people And we did hear from people at our council table through emails and phone calls and otherwise that people were very distraught, devastated, concerned, worried, nervous about the rainfall at that period of time that you make reference to. So I just think it's really important, and so thanks for bringing that to us. Thanks for showing it in 3D so that people will get a better understanding of what it is that we were dealing with at the time. I just have one question. I'm not sure if it'll be for you or for staff, but on March the 4th, will that be the conclusion of Phase 2?
You know, is it, Dale?
That's our expectation. We won't know until we get the final presentation from the engineer, Your Worship.
Okay, then I'll just wait till the delegation is done, and then this will form part of my conversation when we get moving on this.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I'm just wondering, the committee has a particular membership, and you're on there as...
Yep.
Yeah. So are you here on behalf of the committee? Has the committee asked you to come and report to us?
No, actually, I came from on behalf of the society.
As your position on the technical committee, though?
Well, it's a mixed bag, I guess, but I certainly had some information, and obviously this was brought up today, so I thought it was timely to speak to it today.
Did you tell the rest of the committee your intention to come to council and report on the technical committee's work?
To report on the committee's work? I told Catherine Gordon, yes, I did.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, the motion... I don't think we do. The question was, do we need to move receipt of the delegation?
It's practice, Your Worship. It's been the practice this
You'll
evening.
do that? And second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Staff recommendation that a motion to be passed that council receive for information a report regarding Calgary Dams and engineering consultant expenditures. So would you like to do that as well?
I'll move that, Your Worship.
Okay. Seconder? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, you want to speak again on this?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I just questioned the staff earlier today that we discussed the amount and so on, and that so I assumed that would be to perform Phase 1, which is complete, and the analysis of that, and Phase 2, which I understand we should have some form of conclusion by March 4th. I heard earlier today that the end of April from a meeting that I was a participant in this morning. Which warranted additional work to be done to validate the increase from whatever it is to whatever it is. So is the work of Golder done in March 4th with appearances to follow with reports or meetings? Or if I could just have some clarification on how the timeline then has changed to warrant the increased expenditure that we're
Your
receiving in
Worship,
this
I'll
report.
start, and then Mr. Lindsay can correct me or add. But I look at the report, and the report identifies that Phase 2 is to develop options, which I assume we're currently reviewing with Golder, and is the subject of the increase in funding required by council. And I believe it's been delayed because of the the amount of work that was required to do to April, and I'll let Mr. Lindsay comment on that. But following that, of course, should council approve the work and the direction, there would be a Phase 3 that I note in the report that is to develop plans for short-term physical alterations of the dams if required by the province, and that's not anticipated to be required if in fact the committee develops a long-term strategy that is, meets the needs of the province and is accepted by council at the end of the day as the policy group. Mr. Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
Okay, Councilor Wilson? That's fine. Okay. So I think it's been moved and seconded already, and what is all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving into item B, which is the Green Lake sanitary sewer connection options. The purpose is to present council with the options for dealing with the mandatory connection provision of bylaw 2496, which is the sewer regulation and change of bylaw 1982 for the Green Lake area. And the staff recommendation is a motion, which is over leaf on page 4, to extend the fee waived / reduced grace period and implement the following annual increased fee schedule.
Your Worship, I would move staff recommendation 1, 2, and 3.
I'd second, Your Worship.
Seconded? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Brennan.
No, Your Worship, I don't have anything to add. I was going to make the motion, but I am in agreement with it.
Okay, I saw you on the list, but he lurched ahead of you, so but it's done with. So thank you. Councillor Beswick, you're on. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship, to staff, if I may. A day or so ago, in conjunction with this, we received a communication from Mr. Boland, who asked 4 questions. And I think they're worthwhile questions, and I would like to have some answers to those. I can read them off if you like.
Or does staff have them?
Your Worship, we do have them, and I know Mr. Rosen and Mr. Prokopenko are here, and they can address the questions and state the question and then give a response.
Okay, all right.
Or would you like to read them in, Councillor Paggi? Feel free.
I'll state the first question. How much has the city spent on providing the sewer infrastructure necessary to permit these hookups? And it may be remembered that this project, which could have been developed as a local improvement, was fully paid by general ratepayers.
You're on. You're off.
Okay.
Now you're on again.
Yeah.
So the total cost to deliver that project, including design and construction, was about $1.5 million.
Okay. Number 2, what are the costs to general ratepayers of the individual hookups which have been made to date? The 70-some.
So I would interpret that question as, so we've had about 70 connections made, and we've allowed them to, or we've waived that $1,800 connection fee. So if you just do the multiplication, it's about $130,000
okay.
in lost revenue.
Good. The third one is, what is the estimated cost to Green Lake homeowners to meet the standards required by the BC sewerage regulations, and how much will they save or pay annually due to system hookup?
It's a bit of a tough question. I guess if a resident has a septic field and it fails, typically the replacement cost for those is $20,000 or $30,000, depending on the site and what they choose to do there.
Okay, and the last one, what is the estimated increase in the market value of a home? I guess you can't answer this one. Leaving aside the capability of lot subdivision, which comes from installing a municipal sewer system in a home which may be close to its final sewage capacity and require mandatory hookup in any event. I think that might be more for the city manager or Mr. Howard to give an answer to.
Unless, of course, staff wants to go.
I can give you a bit of an answer here.
All right.
So, I mean, if hypothetically a resident on a septic field knew they had a failed field, the value of that would be about $20,000 to $30,000. I mean, typically you don't know if you've got a failed field unless, I guess if you're aware of it, that's one thing, but a potential buyer might not be.
Okay.
So, I mean, the cost of installing the connection to the city is between $6,500 and $10,000. So potentially the value would be in the range of $10,000 to $15,000.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosen.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report, staff. I was gratified to see in the map of Green Lake that the majority of the properties are already on city sewer. So that was reassuring to me. And I also understand that there will be studies taking place in the near future to test the water quality of the lake to ensure that there is no seepage of septic systems going into the lake or to see what the quality is. Is that going to be done in the near future?
So we've approached the province, and they're interested in partnering with us. So the idea is that the city would take the samples from the lake, and the province Ministry of Environment would test them. So I'm not sure if anyone else has any update on that, but that's the intention.
Thank you.
Presumably when it goes from green to blue, it's okay again, is that it?
Just stating that was the prime concern of council at the time when we decided or asked to have the mandatory hookup was the quality of the lake. So that's good. Thank you.
Okay. I see no further questions on that, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And item C has been removed, the property maintenance bylaw. And so we're going to D, the Transportation Advisory Committee minutes. Minutes of the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting held 2013 September 24th, 2013 October 8th, and 2013 December 19th. Someone would like to... George, are you with us? Did you want to move receipt?
Oh.
Earth?
I'd be happy to.
I thought you might.
I would move that the minutes of the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting held September 24th, October 8th, and December 19th, all in 2013, be received.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And bylaw with no accompanying report. Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.042 to rezone the property at 141 Westwood Road from rural resource AR1 to single dwelling residential small lot R2 in order to facilitate a residential subdivision be approved.
So moved.
Moved?
Seconded?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Oh. Councillor Kipp. No, go ahead.
This was the one with the traffic issues on either side of the thing, so I hope we can, with this type of build out in that area, we've got to start to look at some of our intersections. I hope that's coming through the Transportation Advisory Committee.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Bishop. Just a comment. This is one of the ones where narrow streets, increased density, parking issues on sidewalks or no sidewalks. We're getting quite a few calls, emails, and different things about parking on certain streets in our city now, particularly in view of the snowfall as well. So I know when we had this before us previously, we made a commitment that we'd be keeping a very close eye on this because it's a significant development, and so I'm sure that we'll be keeping an eye on parking, emergency vehicles' ability to get in and out, and beyond. So thank you.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving, there's no correspondence. And council appointments, number 12, 12A, appointment to the Grants Advisory Committee. Go ahead. Councillor Kipp.
The council ratify the appointment of Mrs. Taryn O'Flanagan as the committee at large representative to the Grants Advisory Committee for the term ending 2015 March 31st.
Second motion. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And incidentally, I just might want to comment that Ms. O'Flanagan came highly recommended with an incredible bio. I think she will do a wonderful job in that capacity. So we'll move right down into question period related to subject only. Come forward. Yep. This is agenda items only.
Hi, Bruni, 1300 Stewart Avenue. You say the water is not owned by anybody. The Port Authority reckons they own the water in the Nanaimo Harbor. Maybe you should remind them of that once in a while. Concerning property management bylaw, I don't know which one it is, but there's a bylaw concerning people have to keep the sidewalk clear from where they live. Right now, do you realize the city is in a state of emergency? There is no place where you can walk on the sidewalks. And it's impossible for people to clean the sidewalks because when the trucks go by on the road, they push all of it on the sidewalk. The sidewalks are this high. It's extremely dangerous. And I'd like to ask you if you have some kind of a plan B if the weather should continue. In a couple of days, it's going to be Pension Day for seniors, and there's nowhere they can walk. It is really, really dangerous. The only people that can manage to get through is hardy people like myself.
It's a valid point, and we did bring it up.
I mean, you know, we've got to really do something about this.
No, that's fair.
And just one other thing I'd like to just tell the council publicly. Tomorrow, a claim will be filed for an injunction against Mount Benson to save Lindley Valley, the largest bird nesting habitat refuge on Vancouver Island. And I'd particularly like the city manager, Ted Swaby, to diligently have a look at the package that he received concerning Lindley Valley.
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconder? We stand adjourned.
Just look at him. Oh, my goodness, they're not coming to talk.
Why did you look at him and say stop doing that now?
I just have to.